It all started on a sunny Tuesday morning, the kind where you expect peace, quiet, and maybe the sound of birds outside your window, not the sharp knock of someone who's about to turn your life upside down. I opened my door to see Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of our neighborhood, standing there with a clipboard in one hand and a smug smile on her face. She didn't waste a second before announcing, "It's time you joined the HOA. Everyone else has, and you will too." Her tone wasn't a suggestion, it was a demand now. I've never been a fan of unnecessary rules or paying fees for things I don't need. My home was well kept, my yard was tidy, and I didn't see why I should hand over hundreds of dollars just to get permission for what kind of flowers I could plant. I politely told her I wasn't interested. That's when her smile faded, and her eyes narrowed in a way that told me this wasn't over. A week later, I got a letter, not a friendly note, but a legal summons. Karen had actually filed a lawsuit against me for refusing to comply with community standards. The kicker? I wasn't even part of her HOA in the first place. She was trying to force me in, claiming it was mandatory for all decent neighbors. It was absurd, but she was dead serious. When the day of the hearing came, the courtroom was small, and the judge walked in with a calm but curious look. Karen sat across from me, already rifling through her stack of papers, clearly ready to make her big case. I could feel my heart pounding, not from fear, but from the sheer ridiculousness of the situation. Then, before Karen could even get through her first sentence, something happened that made the entire room stop breathing. It changed the outcome in a way no one expected. The next few minutes would decide everything, and I had no idea just how fast it would all unravel. Karen had been a thorn in everyone's side for as long as I could remember. She wasn't just the president of the HOA, she was the HOA. Every decision, every rule, every petty warning slipped under a neighbor's door had her fingerprints all over it. If someone parked their car an inch too far from the curb, Karen knew. If a lawn grew slightly higher than regulation, Karen noticed. And now, she had decided I was her next project. The strange thing was, my house wasn't even in the HOA boundaries. When I bought it, one of the selling points was no HOA fees. No HOA rules. It was perfect freedom from that constant control. But Karen had a different opinion. She insisted that years ago, the HOA maps had shifted, and now my home fell under her authority. No paperwork, no evidence. Just her word and her clipboard. Neighbors had warned me about her, sharing stories of fines for things as silly as leaving a garden hose visible or having a mailbox that wasn't the right shade of black. Some even whispered that she thrived on intimidation, pushing people until they gave in just to avoid the drama. But I wasn't the type to cave, and that seemed to bother her more than anything. In the weeks leading up to the hearing, I caught her walking past my house more often, sometimes stopping to take photos of my yard. Once, I overheard her telling another neighbor, "Some people need to learn the hard way." It was clear this wasn't just about HOA membership. She wanted control. Now, sitting in that courtroom, watching her shuffle her papers and smirk, I could feel the tension building. She thought she had this in the bag. But she didn't know what was coming next, and neither did I. The air was thick with anticipation, and the judge's eyes moved from her to me, as if sensing the storm about to break. Karen had a reputation that stretched far beyond our little street. People said she'd been running the HOA for nearly a decade. And in that time, she'd turned it from a simple neighborhood association into something that felt more like her personal empire. Every holiday decoration had to be approved. Every house color had to be on her official list, and every lawn had to meet her definition of acceptable. It wasn't just about order, it was about power. When I moved in, I'd heard a few warnings. A neighbor casually mentioned, "Just don't get on Karen's bad side." Another joked, "She can smell non-compliance from a mile away." I laughed it off at the time, not realizing how true it was. My decision not to join her HOA was nothing personal. I simply valued my independence. But in Karen's mind, my refusal was a direct challenge to her authority. In the weeks before the court date, the tension between us grew. She started sending me printed notices on HOA letterhead official-looking papers, demanding fees and threatening fines. I knew they had no legal weight, but it was clear she was trying to intimidate me. More than once, I caught her lingering near my driveway, phone in hand, snapping photos. What puzzled me most was her obsession. My single house wouldn't make or break her HOA, so why go through all this trouble? Neighbors speculated that she wanted my property included because of its location. It sat right at the entrance to the community. Maybe she thought bringing it under HOA control would set an example. A warning to anyone else thinking of resisting. Sitting there in the courtroom, I could feel her confidence radiating across the aisle. She thought the judge would see me as a stubborn troublemaker. But something told me her plan wasn't going to go the way she imagined. The question was just how badly would it backfire? The judge cleared his throat, shuffling through the case file as the quiet hum of the courtroom settled into an almost uncomfortable silence. Karen sat upright, chin lifted, her stack of papers neatly arranged in front of her, like weapons ready for battle. I could see the faintest smirk tug at her lips. It's a kind of expression someone wears when they think they've already won. She launched into her opening statement before the judge even fully invited her to speak, rattling off complaints about my refusal to comply with community guidelines and willful rejection of mandatory HOA membership. Her voice was sharp, each word dripping with the certainty that her authority was absolute. She waved a few photographs of my perfectly ordinary yard, as if they were smoking gun evidence of a crime. I sat quietly, letting her have the floor. The truth was on my side, but I could feel the tension climbing with each passing second. The judge's expression remained neutral, but I noticed a slight raise of his eyebrow when Karen claimed my property fell under newly updated HOA boundaries without producing a single official document to back it up. The courtroom felt smaller than ever, the air heavy with unspoken challenges. I could hear the soft scratching of the clerk's pen and the occasional creak of someone shifting in their seat. Karen's voice grew louder, more insistent, as if volume could make up for the holes in her story. Then the judge leaned back, folding his hands, and fixed his gaze directly on her. The pause that followed was long enough to make my heartbeat echo in my ears. Karen stopped mid-sentence, suddenly aware that the room had gone completely still in that moment. I knew something was about to happen, something that could turn the entire case upside down in the blink of an eye. The question was who would be left standing when it did. The judge leaned forward slightly, his eyes narrowing as he asked Karen a simple question. Can you show the court the legal document that places this property under your HOA's jurisdiction? For the first time that morning, her confidence wavered. She hesitated, flipping through her papers with a frantic energy, as if the missing proof might magically appear. The room stayed quiet, the sound of pages turning almost deafening. Then, just as she was about to speak, the door at the back of the courtroom opened, and a man in a crisp suit stepped in. He carried a thick folder under his arm and walked straight to the judge's bench. I didn't recognize him, but the moment Karen saw him, her face drained of color. She tried to mask it with a forced smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. The man handed the judge a sealed envelope, and the judge's expression shifted as he read the first few lines. Whatever was in that document was unexpected because he immediately asked Karen. She was aware of an ongoing investigation involving her HOA. The murmur that rippled through the courtroom felt electric. Karen stammered something about misunderstandings and jealous neighbors, but the judge's focus had already shifted. He started asking pointed questions, not just about my property, but about HOA funds, membership records, and enforcement practices. It was as if the spotlight had suddenly swung away from me and was now fixed entirely on her. I sat there, stunned, realizing this case had just become much bigger than my refusal to join the HOA. Whatever that man brought in was about to change the game completely. Karen's grip on control was slipping, and I could see the faint flicker of panic in her eyes. But the real shock was still to command. I had a feeling it would land harder than anyone in the room expected. The judge set the papers down slowly, his eyes fixed on Karen. The tension in the room was thick enough to touch. "Mrs. Peterson," he said, his voice calm but carrying a weight that silenced even the faintest whisper in the gallery. "According to this report, not only does your HOA have no legal claim over this property, but there is also evidence of fraudulent collection of fees from non-members." Karen's mouth opened, but no words came out. Her carefully arranged papers now looked like a pile of useless scraps. The man who had entered earlier, apparently a state investigator, stepped forward and confirmed that her HOA had been under review for months, following multiple complaints from neighbors. My case had simply brought it all to a head. The judge turned to me briefly, stating that the law